Inflation, crypto crashes, currency wars, land wars, Star Wars. These are crazy times, and it's said that in an insane society, the sane man must appear insane. Well, whether or not we're sane or insane is up for debate, but we think today's guest at least appears sane. But wait, does that mean he's insane? We don't know. But what we do know is that Bill Tai is a really interesting guy, and that rhymes. As an incredibly successful venture capitalist who's helped many unicorns become funded, his take on today's...
Is that a unicorn?
Was that a unicorn?
I don't know. I never heard one.
You're just horsing around? His take on today's current events is quite valuable. He may not be the science guy, but he is Bill Tai, and he's with us today on episode number 617 of the Bad Crypto Podcast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition.
Who's bad?
I mentioned Star Wars on the intro is apparently Disney and their fake wokeness have done it again. The new Obi-Wan series is supposedly a shit show, and I will not be watching it. Star Wars has gone off the rails, and so much for
I watched it. I watched it with the kids. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem so wokish.
Really?
I can see certain moments where they're trying to weave wokery in, but in the end, it didn't seem so wokish.
Oh, well, if you give it at least a thumb sideways.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. So 5 of the episodes have been out. The last one is not out yet. But I mean, I watched, my kids were here this week and last week, and we watched them, and I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good because it brings in Anakin, the Hayden Christensen, really looks pretty similar to how he did whenever they made, episode 3 way back in the day,
which sucked.
And Obi-Wan is Ewan McGregor, whatever his name is. Owen McGregor. Ewan. Yeah. Get in the train, Owen.
I don't know.
So I liked it. I thought it was solid. You know what? There's a couple of moments where I could see they're trying to weave in some wokery, but it wasn't so bad.
All right. So now I want to see, what does Rotten Tomatoes say? And of course, that is where you get both the critics and the audience score. So critics, which if it is woke, they're going to like it, and if it's really good, they might like it as well. 83%. Audience score 59%. I don't know why. Audiences are difficult though, right? Mm-hmm. Audience is just is difficult, and so I'm looking at a lot of the reviews here, and they're not good, but I'm glad you and your kids enjoyed it. If it's entertainment and it kind of takes you away like Calgon from all of the rest.
I enjoyed it because it's Obi-Wan, and they're showing stuff they never showed before, like when the twins were born and Luke and Leia, they get in 2 different places, and now there's young Leia, and I think the next episode is going to be about young Luke, but these are things we never saw before. And like when the younglings were killed by Anakin Skywalker, you've never seen any of these pieces before. So I thought it was pretty well done. I'd give it at least an 85%. Personally,
use the farts, Travis. May the farts be with you.
Yeah.
So this is a really great interview today, guys. I think you're going to really enjoy Bill. You discovered Bill. You found him. He was like hiding on the other side of your wall. What was he doing there?
Well, I interviewed Bill in probably 2013 or 14 when I was with VentureBeat, did the VentureBeat podcast. Stuart Rogers and we interviewed him once upon a time. He was with Treasure Data. I was a marketing technologist, one of the top marketing technologist dudes out there. And so I interviewed and discovered all these different marketing techs. But this guy was first money in a whole lot of really great projects. He's going to talk about that in this episode. Really sharp dude, doing really cool things in Web3. He tends to see things before most. The deals that come his way tend to come his way first. And he has won time and time again. So he's a true futurist because he sees it, puts money in on it, and has been rewarded. And dude, when you watch him, it's like his office is not pretentious. You look behind him and he's just a big fat stack of books behind him. So what do the super sharp people do? They tend to read the words of others and learn as much as possible, standing on the shoulders of giants is what a lot of folks do that are sharp investors. And he's a great dude.
So we think you're going to really enjoy this. Let's get into what in the world is going on with our friend Bill Tai. The world is a crazy, crazy place. Good citizens of the Republic of Bad Cryptopia, and we are your semi-crazy, somewhat insane blockchain blockheads here to take you on that journey down this road. And we thought this would be a good time to catch up with somebody who has been funding startups as a VC since 1991 and has had 23 of his startups become listed companies. The dude has watched every single iteration of the tech cycle, been a part of it, has a lot to say, and we're going to find out what in the world is going on with our friend here, Bill Tai. Bill, welcome to Bad Crypto.
Hey, thanks, Joel and Travis. Wow. Crazy times, fun times, lots of opportunity in the chaos.
Indeed. As I'm reading your bio here, I see you went to U of I. What year?
University of Illinois, class of 1984, electrical engineering.
Is that right? So I graduated in 86, speech
No
comm.
kidding.
So we were on campus in Champaign, I'm assuming,
Yes,
at the same
absolutely.
time. Yeah. So
Wait, is that the guy who gave you a swirly at that party? Because you were the nerd, Joel? Is that the guy you're talking
it might have been. Fortunately, I've always been smart enough to avoid swirly. See, that's the thing about bullies. When you're smarter than bullies, you know how to avoid getting into deals with them, because I had worn glasses since I was 5 years old and I had braces for like 10 years. And I'm like, I'm not messing up my eyes or my teeth. I'm not fighting anybody. I'm a lover, not a fighter. So,
hey, Joel, I got to ask you. So what college in the university were you? And I'm going to make a statement about Illinois that you may or may not know about why they became prominent in engineering.
So liberal arts.
Okay. Yeah. So you may not know that when the transistor was invented, there were three guys that invented it. One was Shockley that ended up at Stanford. One was Walter Brattain that ended up at AT&T Bell Labs. And the other main one was John Bardeen that ended up at the faculty at University of Illinois, which is why in the 50s and 60s, tons of companies in the transformation of the world of electronics would donate equipment to get engineers out of Illinois to join their companies. And AMD was founded by somebody from Illinois. The VP of engineering recently, Jeff Huber's from Illinois, the technical founders of PayPal and YouTube. Obviously, the browser came from there, the first graphical user interface for computer systems. There's so many innovations from Illinois, and most people are like, well, how'd that happen in a cornfield? But that's what.
Yeah, I remember walking by the Triple E building, many times thinking that's where the future is being built, right? It's not in liberal arts college from speech communications. I'm the guy who's going to talk about what they've built. While you guys were busy building there. So anyhow, got our paths crossed. You graduated the same year that my brother did, and he was there in he got his CPA, became an accountant.
Awesome. Another great school in Illinois. Yeah, they're known for that too. Feedstock for lots of the big CPA firms.
So that's really weird, is because I thought that you went to science because you're Bill Tai, the science guy.
That rhymes.
Bill,
yes.
Bill,
One letter off.
Bill.
One letter off.
Oh, wait, it's different. Oh, that's the other guy.
This
Bill
guy's a real scientist. Bill Nye is not. He's a performer.
Okay. All right. Well, never mind. This interview is going to go off the rails now because I thought you were somebody different.
What rails?
Just kidding.
Where we're going, we don't need rails.
No, this is exciting, though. We're talking to somebody who has invested in so many projects that have become unicorns in multiple eras, right? So unicorn is one that becomes $1 billion business. He has invested in more than 10, maybe more than 20 that's become. How many total, Bill? Like, this is like, it's amazing to me, all the wins you found. Like,
it depends on
hell of a batting average you got over there.
Depends on when you clock them, because sometimes they go up and sometimes they go down. Sometimes they'll touch $1 billion and come back down. Sometimes they'll touch $1 billion and go to 150 billion, like Zoom did for a little bit.
One of the first monies in Zoom, folks. We're actually recording this on Zoom. And so this is very meta right now.
Oh, wow.
You probably don't do nearly enough Zoom meetings, I bet, right?
Well, and by the way, Zoom is the metaverse, right? We could all come on here as Lawyer Cat or with an avatar, and it's a different form of metaverse. But people don't actually realize that it is one of the world's biggest metaverses.
Don't get me started on the metaverse discussion. I've done my rant on that on this show so many times. Y'all know how I feel. There's only one stinking metaverse. Everything else is a verse. Too late. I got started. What are some of the other companies that you invested in and threw your VC capital at?
I guess more recently, I'm known as a kind of the catalyst investor that helped get Canva off the ground. Recent valuation on that in the peak of last year was 40 billion. And, valuations are subjective. It might be subjectively lower or not now, but it probably comes back to that or higher if it did go lower. I'm a seed in wish.com. They were a rocket ride coming into the IPO. They've fallen on a little bit of a rough patch here, but you could think of those three as cloud video, cloud design, cloud shopping. I was also a founding investor and co-founder of Treasure Data, which was a cloud Hadoop infrastructure company. I'm an original.
I remember meeting you. So we were already connected on LinkedIn from years ago. So we've been connected, I think, almost 10 years, because I remember meeting you from my previous life of being a marketing technologist and working over there in that space. So that's been, I remember
thank you.
Treasure Data.
Yeah, and thanks for interviewing us there, because that was such a weird, interesting, geeky company at the beginning, doing Hadoop on the cloud, and it became kind of mainstream. Treasure Data today is one of the world's leaders in what's called customer data platforms, kind of a next iteration of what Salesforce.com does. But and I'm an original investor in TweetDeck and Tango and Voxer and.
What's relevant to us? We were the very first podcast to ever talk about NFTs with CryptoKitties, and you were an early investor with Dapper Labs, correct?
Yes, I'm in that the first round of funding from angels. I'm in there with guys like Mark Pincus and folks like that. Yes, yeah. So Dapper Labs, and I did happen also in the crypto space. Somewhere back in 2010, I started getting into mining, and ended up paying for the silicon chip that was Bitfury's main ASIC in that era from kind of 2012 through 2017. They were probably the largest mining operation for many of those years, and still a player, not as big as others now, but still a significant force in the market.
So what was your first thought? Hold on, go ahead, Joel.
Follow up. Go ahead. What was your first thought?
What was your first thought when you encountered Bitcoin? Because you mentioned 2010, like that's super early. When I encountered it, I thought, wow, this is magical internet money. I put it on my laptop. I mined a block. It destroyed my laptop. I was pissed. This thing destroyed my computer. God, this thing sucks. And then I ended up losing my Bitcoin. And I should have thought, wow, I should get a whole bunch of computers, but I didn't. I cussed it. So when you first saw it, how does your thought process go when you see a new technology like Bitcoin? What's the Bill Tai sort of, how do you do analysis on something new that comes your way like that?
Well, I have to say that the build up to that moment was many years. So I first got super excited about it Thanksgiving weekend 2010, and there's a tweet out there on my account that is kind of a historic tweet saying, hey, anyone else using Bitcoin? It's the peer-to-peer currency, fascinating potential. And why I immediately took to it, there's a couple of threads here. One was a good friend of mine around year 99 or 2000 started Second Life. Philip Rosedale, he's a guy that used to snowboard with me. And when Second Life launched, there wasn't a lot to do because it was an unstructured game. And I took the avatar name and role of Alan Greenspan Gollum. And Alan Greenspan was chairman of the Fed around that time. So Philip and I used to talk a lot about economics and currencies, and launched the Linden dollar around 2004, 5, 6. So I was already thinking about it for a good 5 or 6 years before the Bitcoin white paper even came out. And around that era, 1999, I started a company that called at the time iFrog.com. So you could visualize a frog with big eyes. It was a peer-to-peer infrastructure network for video content delivery. Philip Rosedale was one of my advisors, as was Linus Torvalds, who worked in one of my companies, at an all-star team. And we created this incredible piece of technology that did survive to get acquired by Nokia to become something they launched with their web phones in 2006 called Files by Ovi. It was basically iCloud 2 years before the iPhone came out. And but Nokia didn't have the right hardware. Anyway, so the peer-to-peer element, the understanding of macroeconomics and currencies led to an epiphany when I was like, this is it. This is it. This is the culmination of those technologies into a value exchange methodology that's going to be super secure, really low friction, and just universal. And so I just kind of went all in and ended up funding, which was hard at the time, funding somebody's silicon to do it at scale.
All right, let's jump to current, because the title of the show is What the World is Going On with Bill Tai. What the world is going on, right? We've got out of control inflation. We've got an administration that seems to need a complete rectal cranial extraction. We have Celsius, we have Luna and these defaults and DeFi. Bitcoin is right at its previous all-time high, which is down quite a bit from its most recent all-time high. You're looking at the scenario along with the people you talk with, and what do you see happening here? And are we going into some sort of deep recession? Will crypto decouple? And what about Naomi? I feel like it's turning into a soap opera.
So you've touched on a whole bunch of different waves of things that are converging right at this time. From a big macro perspective, it feels like the equity markets and bond markets, the major capital markets, are hitting something that feels a little bit like what happened in the late 70s, early 80s, when there was the oil price shock from OPEC. That caused an inflationary spike that wouldn't go away, and a rapid increase in interest rates under Paul Volcker to jam interest rates up when you were in college. You might remember when you were at Illinois, you could take your government loans for school at 0 to 3% interest raits and throw them in the money market at 14 to 16%. Right?
I wasn't smart enough to know that I could do that. I just learned that today. 40 years after, getting out of school. So thanks, Bill. I feel real stupid now.
But I was lucky enough to arb my student loans into, some good interest rate stuff, but we're in that kind of environment again, where I think the Fed has to do something to shock the price shock out of the system. The increase in the interest rates obviously makes other asset classes that provide interest returns a lot more attractive than they've been for a long time. Obviously, if in the environment of a couple years ago, if you have near 0% interest rate on your bank account, there's no reason to put your money in the bank. So it all was going into the equity markets and into venture capital and crypto. Now I think, we're on a path where you might actually be better off hanging out, waiting for a bit, and then putting it into interest-bearing things, which then depresses the equity market. So I think from a big stock market picture, we have that. We have rising rates, shrinking multiples. In the crypto markets, because of the withdrawal of liquidity from the system, I think those entities that have concentrated debt positions on top of what they're holding, they're experiencing difficulty in keeping the system liquid and paying, just like if you borrowed too much money on your own income. And we are facing what feels like, little baby Bear Stearns and Lehman moments, just like the overall financial system was at risk because Bear Stearns had those hedge funds with enormous debt on them, as did Lehman on its own balance sheet. These little things that we're seeing out of whether it's Celsius or, Three Arrows Capital or what happened with Terra Luna, those are going to be little shocks to the system where there's a crater that kind of imploded on itself, and that crater of, disappearing capital's got to get filled in before the system stabilizes. But, so big picture risk, tactical implosion. It's going to drag down valuations along with, what's happening in the macro market for a little bit here. But in every piece of chaos, there's opportunity. Warren Buffett always says you buy when there's blood in the streets, including your blood. And everyone out there is bleeding a little bit right now.
Oh, it's bloody.
It hurts. My shirt's all red.
Bloody hell.
My glasses are all red too. It's weird. So, a lot of people are going, okay, so like what now? We've talked about that Warren Buffett quote. In fact, we were on a Twitter space last night. We mentioned something to that effect. And then one of the people said, from hearing from you guys and hearing that Warren Buffett quote, Bitcoin might be at 20 grand, but I'm buying. All right. And so a lot of people are talking about, including Joel mentioned it last night, that we think the markets are sort of oversold in some places. Maybe ETH is oversold tremendously. Bitcoin might be oversold. As he mentioned, we're going really close to that all-time high. The total crypto market right now, the all-time high crypto market in 2017, 2019 was $840 billion. Now we're sitting at $929 billion. Like, those numbers are teetering really close. Where are we heading in that regard? Like, with the oversold stuff, is that accurate from your estimation? Are we going to bounce up off of 20 and pop up for a little bit? Are we going to dip below 20? And if so, it will be the first time in Bitcoin's history that it's ever actually gone below a previous cycle's all-time high after creating massive new highs. So, putting on your future hat, what do you think? How are you handling it? Or what do you think, we're seeing?
Yeah, I think basically so when asked, are we at a bottom? That's always a relative question to where interest rates are and where other asset classes are, right? If valuations for everything else in the world are coming down, crypto may come down proportionately. But if you take a spot moment like right now, it's if interest rates were to stabilize. So if you didn't have moving waters, a rising or falling tide in the rest of the stuff on a relative basis, I think we'd be near a bottom. But could we have further increases in interest rates, to then bring the valuations of other things down because there's a sucking sound of the capital out of, quote, risk assets into safe, interest-bearing things? That could happen, right? So I'd say that I wouldn't be surprised if there's a panic moment where Bitcoin could fall to between 14 and 20K. That wouldn't be out of the picture. I don't think it would last very long. And I think, like Warren Buffett's quote, when there's true panic, every time there's been true panic, like the Lehman moment in the last, great financial crisis, those were always buying opportunities. So the question is, what is your time frame? If you can hang on long enough or want to hang on long enough, there's going to be fantastic buying opportunities in this coming months.
I've seen two people tweet today that they think the V shape is going to be massive, and they're calling for 100,000 this year. Is that out of the question? Or when we look at how quickly we went from 3,500 to 69,000, does that seem like something that could be a reality?
I think so I wouldn't rule it out. The factors that would have to be in place, in my individual opinion, for something like that to happen would be that the tightening of rates, meaning the raising of rates, and the withdrawal of liquidity from the Fed balance sheet that has caused this kind of contraction and, kind of spread of fear. If that starts to affect the overall economy in a way where the jobs growth rate stops going up and goes down, so where people are losing their jobs broadly, not just in tech, and where the revenue to companies broadly starts to slow down, meaning we have a recession and job loss. While it sounds like, whoa, how could that produce a high? That sounds totally dumb. That is the scenario under which the Fed would start to pump money into the system again to keep it from falling off a cliff. So, this is exactly why all of these assets, stocks, crypto, everything else went rocketing during COVID because the economy stopped. And the Fed had to do something about it. Just like in Second Life, if you pump a lot of currency into the system, the economic activity starts to go. And that's when the assets start to rise in price. And right now, we're in a mode where the Fed is trying to cool stuff down because of the shock from Ukraine and oil prices and other gas prices coming up. They've got to take that edge off. Otherwise, the whole system becomes unstable.
So let me ask you about this, because there are some geopolitical, global economic things at play here, right? Because China's having bank runs right now. Nobody's really talking about it, but Evergrande crashed, right? That's huge. And so that aside, we've taken, the world financial system has taken Russia off of the world financial rails, right? And now countries are saying, wait a second, they just canceled Russia. Okay, so are they going to cancel us? And so it seems like there's more countries that are looking at the option of no longer using dollars as the petrodollar, right? And so there's the risk of the dollar no longer being the world reserve currency. Like, this run right here is the one that it seems to me like we've been hearing about for years. Like, that it's like, whoa, this could be real. This could be unlike this could be godlike crash.
There is that pressure building in the system. I don't know if it's going to happen anytime, the collapse. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. My guess is that the major collapse doesn't happen in my lifetime. It might happen in the next generation's lifetime or the one after that. But, people always wonder, like, wow, with all this money printing that's been going on, why aren't we in kind of like the Weimar Republic Germany thing where people read books with pictures of people pushing shopping carts full of paper bills to get a loaf of bread? And I think we're in a really interesting situation here. If you think about the big picture, it's fascinating because we're in a world today where the world GDP, meaning the whole world product, like, if you measure the revenue of everything sold in a year, it's around 70 trillion. The debt load supported by that 70 trillion is about 270 trillion. The ratio, total amount. So yeah, okay. Total amount of debt supported by the 70 trillion of economic activity. But for a long time, the GDP has only been growing a couple percent a year. The debt grows 10% a year like clockwork, right? So we might add a couple trillion of GDP every year, but we add, 10% of 270 at 27 billion on top of the trillion every year. As I might have a zero off on that, but the big 270 trillion is growing 10% a year. The GDP of 70 is growing 2% a year.
And explain to us, Bill, explain to our listeners, like, who exactly is that owed to, right? And people go, wait a second, the U.S. owes how many trillions of dollars? Like, to who?
Yeah, okay,
right?
so
that's me.
Who,
I sent an invoice to the U.S. government, and I'm
they got to pay Joel,
and I'm taking it, in small payments is fine. I don't need it all at once.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the whole world's debt of all kinds, like, mortgage debt, consumer debt, company to company debt, bond market. So it's not just the US, but the US obviously as the tokenized value that's underlying a lot of that because it's denominated in US dollars. If the system somehow breaks, then the main currency, of course, is kind of at risk, right? Because putting it back or bringing it back to what you said about China Evergrande, the way the system had been functioning until recently was all equally scarily fascinating. Everybody in America shops at, Walmart or whatever they shop at online through Amazon. Everything you buy is made in China, right? So when you buy that item here and you pay, that payment in US dollars goes to China, but it doesn't go to the guy that made the goods. It goes to the Bank of China and they hoard it. And they use that pile of US dollars to print their currency against their holding. So there's a little bit of a shim where they can increase or decrease their money supply separate. And then the dollars that they're hoarding, they lend them back to us at interest rates. So they accrue all that money and then we pay them interest for holding US dollar money, and so that system just has been growing and growing and growing. And Neil Ferguson, author of Ascent of Money, calls that chimerica.
Chimerica.
Yeah, so there's these loops of capital going around, and now that there's some increasing divisiveness that wants to kind of break that relationship, China is sitting on I forgot the number. I think it is 4 trillion, or it's into trillions of dollars of US dollars sitting there. Every time the US government has a shortfall, and we do run a deficit very consistently, the US government's either got to print that money or borrow that money. When they go to borrow that money, the lender is China or any of these other countries that are holding those dollars. If they decide that they don't want to hold those dollars anymore, there's no borrowers, or there's not none, but there's a big chunk that doesn't get filled, and the interest rates spike, and that'll cause all kinds of issues in our country. So it's a very delicately balanced system that is kind of been on edge for a while, and increasingly so.
Well, if you were China, wouldn't you want to have domination with your currency over the US dollar then? Could they not manipulate the world markets in that direction?
I do think that they covet that role. I think I'm guessing, and purely speculative, I'm guessing that they covet it, but realize that it can't easily be taken over quickly. There was a time when the US dollar kind of passed the British pound in prominence as the main way to trade anything. And up until that point, it had been kind of the British pound as the dominant currency, with America becoming a manufacturing source, which was also how oil was denominated. And you might, George Soros, everybody knows his name. People may know that he made his big hit by being short the British pound. And at a time when it was argued that there's no way a little hedge fund financial, group could overwhelm the Bank of England, the bank of the richest, most productive, biggest economy, one of the biggest economies of the world. There's no way he could win that bet, but he did. Because, that was the point at which the British Empire had a saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. And that little tiny island country controlled Canada, Australia, whatever it was. They had a military base everywhere in the world. And so they were supporting people and machinery and military all around the world on this little economy. And they could no longer do it. So the country was on the verge of bankruptcy. So their currency collapsed, and Soros made a bundle. So I'd argue that America looks a little bit like that now. We're not at that teetering brink, but here we have installations all over the world. We're funding through debt, everything in the world. And it ultimately would put our currency at risk if something goes wrong.
It's almost like that's the plan. Right? Because, if you go and see what's happening at World Economic Forum and you pay attention to them, they talk about wanting this great reset and resetting the economy and making sure that, there's all this equality for everyone except the ones all at the top of the food chain. Right. And so it seems bizarre. It almost seems like, I kind of look at the last 20 years and go, okay, post 9/11, we spent how many trillions of dollars over in the Middle East in this war. Right. And then we just moved in this, the security industrial complex is every airport now has all this stuff, right? It's like they start leading us through. Oh, we're got to be shuttled through like cattle, right? And we got to kind of train society, move through, and then the amount of debt that we've encountered in the last 20 years has really taken away prosperity from our future in a lot of ways, right? Just bad, and that's Democrat, Republican, both sides. They've all been part of it. And so I just wonder, it's like, when is that end game? When is that time when it's like, because to me, I've always been kind of scared of the stock market, knowing that Federal Reserve notes are fictitious. They print them out of thin air. There's no gold or anything that backs them. Once I understood that in 2000, right after the tech bubble, I was like, oh my God, like this is eventually inflation and printing of money is going to create hyperinflation, which will eventually teeter the economy because it's fiat money that's based on nothing. historically it's always crashed. When is it going to crash? And so my mind has always been acutely aware. And so I've missed out on some major stock investment opportunities just because I don't believe in the system, right? Whereas Bitcoin, I believe in the system, but then Bitcoin's inherently tied to the value of the US dollar, and all these other cryptos are inherently tied to the value of Bitcoin. And so we've not been able to uncouple or decouple it from the traditional financial set. And here we are. I saw it again in March of 2020 when COVID happens and they're shutting down the economy and Bitcoin and crypto tanks in accordance to the stock market. And then the stock market takes off and there's not a whole lot of consumer behavior going on. So it's really strange to me because I pay attention to it, but I don't understand all the mechanisms of what's driving a lot of these things. I do believe there's a nefarious set of people up at the top that are just so hungry for control and power, and they're so greedy that they're never satisfied and they love to kind of control things. And so I'm just wondering, like, what should someone do at this time right now? What should the normal Joe and Jane, how should we be looking at this? Like, what should we be, how should we be acting?
It's you said a couple of key things in there when you were talking about, I believe in the system, right? Or I believed in the system. And this is the key thing that keeps every system going. I think, part of the reason you don't have the issues that Weimar Germany faced is because most Americans just don't even think about it, right? They don't look at the big picture. They don't realize the level of debt. So they just don't care. And so long as that's the case, the society's fat, dumb, and happy, which is okay, right? Because then we're all fat, dumb, and happy, and we're happy.
Bread and circuses, baby. Keep them fat, fed, and entertained.
That's it. That's it. And I have I guess a similar question, but a different viewpoint when you were saying, well, there's a bunch of people trying to control everything. There probably are. Actually, I think there are people that are sort of trying to be the puppet master over the whole system. But I picture a different thing. I think they don't really have control of the puppets, and they're like hair on fire trying to figure out how to just keep it on the rails, because things are just too hard to control, And so if we had the control mechanisms or people that could, we wouldn't have all this circus antic stuff that we're seeing in the US government around, did the guy win or did he lose the election? Or if he lost the election, was he lying? Or like there's like a fucking, sorry, it was a circus. It's a circus.
Right. It is a circus.
Yeah, it'd be things.
You're right. It's a fucking circus. We can discuss that in this podcast.
That's the new title of this particular episode. Yeah. So what I hear you saying is there's a lot of sky is falling people are out there, right? And we've heard this. I mean, I remember when Clinton got elected, people were like, oh, this is the end. He's going to destroy the economy. And then, Bush got elected. Oh, he's going to war and he's going to destroy the economy. And then Obama came in with more leftist principles. This is the end. And of course, Trump was going to, ruin everything. Turns out we had the best economy in years. And now, with Biden, it's like the approval ratings are the worst they've been since Jimmy Carter. Like his approval ratings are worse than Jimmy Carter. And there's still people standing by this and believing that the gas premiums are the Putin tax hike. What do you say to those people?
I think inflation is one of those things where I don't know that you can blame it on any one person.
Yeah.
So I think, there's definitely been sort of a systemic buildup. I think a lot of people were just amazed that we could have an economy with near zero interest rates as long as we did, because there was, quote, no price to money. And when there's no cost to capital, bad decisions are nearly costless. So there's a lot of capital allocated to things that maybe shouldn't have been allocated to. And when rates start to rise, you start to flush that out. And so I think from a macro sense, it is interesting. If you look at the history of capitalism, it's never ended well, and it always ends. And so fiat currencies, I don't think that there's ever been a standard fiat currency that has been kind of the main dominant one for more than a couple hundred years ever. And so the US dollar in its current form has actually only been around since 1972. So from after World War II, talking about the destruction that comes with capitalism, when the Industrial Revolution happened and people got mechanized war, and there was, a concentration of economic power in those who could own the machinery that had the capital, you ended up with these hard borders, military defend those economies, very competitive nations against each other, and war. And after all that stuff was destroyed because we destroyed ourselves in Europe and all that stuff, America was last man standing. So everything was gone, right? Imagine being in Europe among the 100 million people where you're standing on piles of rubble and every piece of paper you held previously had a face on it of a guy that was dead and no longer in power. You're holding a piece of paper with Hitler's face or Mussolini's face, and you got to reset, right? So that was Bretton Woods. So the near modern currency era, we basically said, oh my God, we need to restart the world. Let's just make it up and say the dollar is worth this much gold, and that's the reference, and this many, euros, not euros, this many lira, this many marks, this many francs to the dollar. Print them, hand them out like UBI. Gentlemen, start your engines. We start over, and then that only lasted from Bretton Woods until 72, and now we've been in the petrodollar era for 50 years.
Once Charles de Gaulle, I believe, rolled up to New York and was like, "All right, I got all these dollars. I'd like to get my gold." And they were like, "Whoa, right. whoa, that's whoa. We're not going to give you all that gold." And like, no, we got battleships here in Hudson Bay. We're ready to get our gold. And they're like, "Hold on, yeah, I think we need to take it off the gold standard right now because there's not enough gold."
It would have drained the Federal Reserve of all the countries holding dollars out there to cash them in at once. The Federal Reserve would have been empty. So Nixon had to take it off the gold standard, and we moved to the petrodollar. So our currency went from being backed by gold to being effectively backed by oil or the productivity associated with oil. So countries that had surpluses could hoard oil barrels in the form of US dollars that were swappable for them. So the US dollar became kind of like an ICO token for barrels of oil.
It's a scam. It's a scam.
It was like a big scam.
You said that capitalism always ends and it never ends well. The same could be said for socialism, though. It always ends. Well, when it does end, it never goes well, whether it ends or not, because there's socialism. People live under dictatorships far longer than they live in prosperity, because dictatorships are hard to break. Prosperity tends to break itself. When you look at the social issues that we're focused on today, our fascination with celebrity, celebrity trials and sexuality, like things that are just so personal, we're bored to death. And that is never a good sign for a civilization when we stop talking about the things that are actually important.
I agree. Idle. Yeah, there's a phrase I don't remember.
Idle hands are the devil's workplace. Yeah.
So when you're idle, that's the worst. If the combination of really smart people that are idle, that's the worst.
I mean, the greatest generation, the generation that went to war, right, and fought for true freedom, they had meaning and significance. And then they raised the next generation that, they had to deal with a war that was like, what are we doing here? Vietnam. And then the whole corporate, war military machine becomes a thing. And now everybody's questioning everything. And the foundation.
That quote, that one quote of tough times create tough people create good times create, weak people create tough times, right? We're in this situation right now where weak people we're crying about problems that are not even really problems. Like, your feelings have been, you have said feelings. Well, I come from the era sticks and stones may break my bones, but words are never going to hurt me. And now you say some word that offends somebody, like, whoa, that's the worst thing ever. That shows that we're going into a weak system and hard times are here, especially when we have the automation, right? It's like, oh, we need $15 an hour to work at McDonald's. Like, no, you don't. We're going to put up kiosks, and we're going to get automatic hamburger presses, right? It's like
in Trav,
innovation takes a lot out of the way.
Those weak people are then the first ones to cry and whine when they don't have their needs met, and they have their hands out, and they want the government that helped create the problems to then solve the problems.
Yeah, Joel, you said something earlier where you said the greatest generation, what they had was meaning. That is what's missing, in my opinion. I think if you think about the way society has drifted, if you want to call it that, from the greatest generation, when you live a life of meaning and mission, then the other stuff doesn't matter so much because you're driven by a greater good, a greater purpose. And I think we somehow, as a society, or not just ours, but as people get prosperous, they kind of lose that, and they start to move towards this pure superficial transactionalism. And then it's all kind of just, it all loses its meaning. So I think we need a reset. And by the way, I am not a religious person at all. I went to a Lutheran kindergarten, but I've never been to church since. That said, I do believe that people need to live to a greater set of values for society to properly function, and that you get the most out of life if you live an authentic life with people in a community where you share values and can build together.
Look at what happened, and whatever people believe about their faith is fine, but the downward spiral in morality began when they stopped teaching the Bible in school. Even if you're going to teach it as a history book or as a moral lesson book, there's so much there. It was shortly after that we decided, hey, it's okay to take unborn life. And now tens of millions of babies have been taken. And maybe, we're seeing a trend in that. But when people don't have a moral pinning as a culture, an underpinning, a foundation, anything goes. And that's always, inertia is going to say that's going to go into chaos, which I think is what's happening right now. You can't say that a woman is a woman. We live in true clown world.
Well, I think what I'm interpreting about what you're saying, and that I do agree with, is that we need a set of values. You can call it a moral fabric. You can call it a set of guidelines by which everybody agrees to live. So that there's kind of a common set of principles around which people know how to fit into the context of a greater group of people. And I think this is a little bit of the issue we have now, that there's such factionalism around very different sets of value interwoven into a bigger fabric where they just can't mesh anymore. So I think when people get into tougher times, like the greatest generation, and there's an outside force that people are looking at, they stop looking at each other. It's the idle mind thing again, right? You're kind of unifying against either a common mission or a common enemy. And we don't really have that right now.
We don't really have that right now. What we have is a crazy time that we're all trying to figure out. And we're in this wild space together. They all say, hey, we're all going to make it. I think we're all going to make it. But I do think that things are a little interesting for a while as things sort of shake up. And, what is maybe some advice that you would give people for over these next few months as things are sort of crazy and as we're moving forward here?
Well, given that this is a crypto podcast, I think for this segment in particular, I think that the one beautiful thing about the fabric that is afforded by crypto and blockchain is that it does allow the discovery and unification and economic alignment of interest of any given specific community of interest. And the key word in there is community. I think to the extent that you can find groups of people that think and feel and believe the same things and can attach to those, from an economic perspective, if you're, like kind of looking at like, how do I preserve what little I have in that system? You want to look for strong communities. And, among the projects that I'm working on that I think fit this discussion perfectly is a company called Metagood. And, what we wanted to create with that is the kind of the genesis block of all good, however you define all good. And we have a collection called On-Chain Monkey, which is an NFT collection that is a PFP that trades around. The commissions on those transactions go into a pool. That capital pool does fund the operations of the company, but it's also a bucket of capital that gets tapped out there like a magic wand in the structure of a DAO. So anyone that's holding that OCM can vote or nominate something to be funded, and then everyone else can vote on it. And we've provided capital to save the children in Ukraine. We've used the funds to evacuate Afghan girl from the hands of the Taliban. You might have seen that in Thanksgiving. She was evacuated out to Italy with her family. That was our capital providing the backstop for that. We provided broadband to schools in Rwanda, on the theme of trying to develop economies so that there's a kind of a greater economic force all around to generate the GDP to help handle all that debt we talked about earlier in this world. So I think, look for communities that are strong and vibrant, that are mission driven, that aren't just speculative. Like, the speculative entities out there, they get hammered in environments like this. Things with true authenticity, they're sticky. Actually, the On-Chain Monkey collection, by the way, is the only collection in the mid-stage kind of 1 to 7 ETH that's actually up in the last 30 days. Everything else is down big, like all other markets. The price of the OCMs is actually higher today than they were 30 days ago.
And they were actually a free mint, right? Didn't you guys do something where they were originally a free mint?
Exactly.
Yeah, and so you guys have earned the royalties on that, which is a really solid project. And I believe we're going to have Amanda, your CTO of Metagood, on a future Nifty show to go more in-depth talking about that in the future. And are you going to New York for NFT NYC?
I will drop by there, as I always do. It's obviously it's one of the big gatherings for NFTs annually, and one of the most fun. So, highly recommend attending. Lots of great people, lots of great topics, and incredibly fun side parties. So definitely make it out there if you get a chance.
And now we know what in the world is going on. Bill, thanks for coming on the show today, sharing your insights and opinions with us. You guys can find links to Bill's LinkedIn, as well as the projects that he's involved in the show notes for this episode, badco.in/617. And we'll look forward to perhaps bumping heads with you in New York City.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Travis. Been fun talking to you. You liven it up.
Did you like that? We told you you'd like that. Of course you liked it. Bill's smart.
I hated it. It was horrible. The guy's so smart and rich.
You're canceled.
I'm his favorite.
So, Trav, this episode goes out on Wednesday night, which I guess will be, Wednesday, the 22nd of June, 2022. And we are eyeballs deep in NFT NYC as this episode comes out. We gave our keynote yesterday, which will be Tuesday the 21st, which of course is still a few days ahead. We're recording in advance because we're going to be at the show. So how was the keynote? How did we do?
I thought you probably could have done a little better, Joel. It was really hard work carrying you the whole time. My jokes were just on point, and really, I had to pick up your slack in the future. And so in the future, I don't want to do that. So how about never mind? You did great.
I think the corn joke was really well placed, though.
We probably ought to go through the presentation, make some tweaks this weekend, and get it to where it's all ready. So we don't have, neither one of us have to carry anybody. Actually, you're going to do awesome, and you're going to be on stage the whole day over there. So that's beautiful, my dude.
It's going to be super fun. Both of us are going to be emceeing on main stages, and hopefully we've run into some of you. This is past us talking to future us about the past, and we appreciate you guys listening to the show. Of course, we always love when you go and give a review. Well, we don't always love it. We only love it when you give us a good review. Make sure that you let us know, what you'd like to hear in the future. If you got some guests you think we should have on, some topics you'd like us to cover, some teachings that you would like us to bring you. Would love to hear from you on that. Of course, you can email us at badcryptopodcast@gmail.com, and make sure you follow us on the Twitters at badcryptopod. We will be doing another Twitter Spaces next week, and you don't want to miss this. It's going to be all the latest news live and in real time, along with your commentary if you want to join us on stage, and a commemorative POAP, an NFT that we will be dropping to you, to be designed by Sir Lord Travis Wright in the vein of an Obi-Wan Kenobi style.
That's not true, but thank you.
That's not true at all. All right. Thanks again for listening. We appreciate you guys. We are coming up on 5 years of badness in July, and we're going to do a special anniversary episode where basically we're going to say happy anniversary and stay bad.
We should do that, and if we don't have a party here, we can at least have the call here.
Oh well, we'll do an online party at the very least, right? We'll have a Zoom.
Oh, dude, we could do a Twitter space that day.
Yeah. Bring your own
5-year
cake.
Anniversary Twitter space.
And bring your own booze, and bring a date, and we'll keep you posted. Stay bad.
Who's bad?
The Bad Crypto Podcast is a production of Bad Crypto LLC. The content of the show, the videos, and the website is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. It's not intended to be and does not constitute financial, investment, or trading advice of any kind. You shouldn't make any decisions as to finances, investing, trading, or anything else based on this information without undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with a professional financial advisor. Please understand that the trading of Bitcoins and alternative cryptocurrencies have potential risks involved. Anyone wishing to invest in any of the currencies or tokens mentioned on this podcast should first seek their own independent professional financial advisor.